We're good to go. Thanks, Cassie. All right, call the PBA advisory to order. All three districts are present. Notice was posted on March the 14th. Item number one is discussion possible action regarding recommendation for Public Building Authority for capital improvements to properties or facilities of the PBA or the beneficiary of authority, be the county, to be funded in whole or in part from proceeds of the PBA's 2024 bond issuance. And just to remind everyone that initial issuance was just over $15 million. Mr. Monroe, do you want to speak to us? We've discussed kind of by way of history, and I may get something wrong. In preparing for to request the PBA to consider issuing the bonds, we had a number of items that we had looked at for possible funding. I think the item that they conceptually approved were items dealing with campus security, the courthouse, annex fourth floor, the Juvenile Justice Center, the garages themselves, ICB, and the acquisition of revenue generating properties, and then some other expenditures, perhaps in that second issuance, which is depending on the revenue that we can generate, anywhere from probably $10 to $15 million at this point. Is that accurate?
That's what I recall.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, I don't have the list of those specific items for consideration or the associated costs in front of me, but I think I remember what you're.
Well, with Stacy here now, perhaps we can reconstruct some of that. I think the first project that we've all recognized that needed to be in this first round is the PBA exterior project. We've got, I think, around $2.25 million that was set aside from the first iteration of that project that once we canceled our contracts, we held. The ICB exterior, yes, thank you, Charles.
I think the engineer's estimate that we got on that's about 7, so we're gonna need an additional 5 from these bonds.
Okay,
Then the CMAR's on the street, so as soon as we get him on board, that estimate will get closer to what it maybe really is gonna be.
so would it, I don't want to piecemeal this, I'd rather do this all as one, but we're of the opinion that we need approximately $5 million in bond funding. Okay. The other things that we had talked about were some structural repairs over in the garage and some drain replacements. I have those. At the time, the structural repairs were estimated at $500,000. The drain replacement was at $500,000, and we had a security station at approximately $250,000. In addition to the security station, I think we were looking at doing some type of permanent protection for the office rather than what we have there now.
Yes.
And we were looking at the installation of, at a minimum, some of the film to the windows. Is that accurate?
Yes, and we've talked about some other measures over there as well, completely blanking off the windows that allow the exit lane on Kerr to be viewed with a block or brick wall, and then the employment of cameras and screens to give looks there that way. we could adequately protect those people inside the office.
Okay. We're at, in terms of the structural repairs that are needed, I think that was work to some of the beams and columns. Is that's right? And we had some exploratory work done.
Yes, initially we had our structural engineers come out. They pointed out some of the areas of concern that should be repaired and then gave us a 5-year plan moving forward to address some of those surfaces to prevent degradation.
And Keith, within that 5-year plan, was that total, were those totals approximately what I mentioned
Yes.
there, the 500,000?
Yes.
Total? Okay. All right, so we could potentially knock that out.
Mhm.
The storm drain replacement?
We're working on estimates there. The storm drains from top to bottom were made of cast iron, and they are certainly at the end of life. We have some areas where the piping is rotted and rusted through. So we had contractors out last week to have a look and hopefully get some pricing to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do you think you'd have that? The pricing from them?
I'm not sure. I would hope in the next week or two
Weeks,
at
okay,
the
great.
outside.
Thank you.
And then the security work, in addition to that, in the ICB, we were considering upgrading the gates and perhaps a new security station at the west gate. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's what I recall.
Do we have any numbers on those?
No numbers there yet.
Okay. For the courthouse itself, we had talked, and I think you had mentioned that one of the areas of consideration should be a roof repair and or replacement. Is that correct?
A roof replacement, definitely.
And the number that we were working from was in the $1 million range.
That's what I recall.
And that is something that we could get off of state contract. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So that work could, if it were approved by the PBA, we could begin that work.
We can
Pretty
move on that
quickly.
quickly.
Okay.
The stairwell off the 11th floor.
Yep.
We
I
had
had-
some money set aside for that. We probably need another 250,000 maybe to get that out for bid.
You need how much, Stacy?
Another 250.
250. Okay. And that was something that was in some of our conversations as well. Okay. Bear with me for just 1 second.
Stop moving.
Okay, so sorry, I'm trying to keep track of these. With regard to Metro 1 and 2, again, Keith, we're looking at somewhere around $1 million for the proposed repairs.
Mhm.
And the importance there is it's the cash cow.
And maintaining the integrity of the asset.
Right. Okay. We had a initial look at the security station of 250,000 over there, plus those other things that we had mentioned. And the repairs to the gates or replacement of the gates.
I don't have any numbers there just yet.
As knowing that we're trying to work in that $15 million range, as we're going through this, I'm thinking somewhere in the order of 2 million, 2.5 million to make a recommendation to set aside for that, knowing that we could always move that money if those projects didn't come to fruition.
I'm calculating 7.5 million, those projects that you just listed and assigned numbers to.
That's
Yeah.
what I got. So.
I've got ICB at 5, the courthouse at 1.25, that would be a roof
1.2, okay.
and the 11th floor. The metro repairs and then the security issues, inclusive of the 2 gates and a new guard shack at $2 million.
Will you repeat that? Because I'm tracking with his 7.5 million, but
Well, that's okay. So we
You
have
mentioned the
ICB,
ICB exterior first. We discussed that first. at
ICB
5
exterior
million.
at 5 million.
We discussed parking over there at 500,000 and 500,000. We discussed security at 250,000.
Correct.
We discussed the courthouse roof at $1 million, and we discussed the stairwell in the courthouse at 250,000.
it was just 7.5. And now let's go back to yours.
Okay. So, and I have ICB at 5, the courthouse itself at 1.25, which would be the roof and the 11th floor.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's 6.25. Then for the parking garage for the repairs, that's $1 million, so that's 7.25. We had a guard shack at 250, plus we had an unidentified cost for the 2 gates.
Yes, okay.
And a new guard shack. And what I'm wondering is if a recommendation of $2 million would be enough to address those.
With the alley, you're throwing 2 million at the alley, basically, right?
I think that's excessive, just off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, do we have, where did you pull the $250,000 from? I'm just asking. We're curious. For the guard shack.
When we had a discussion following the event.
Okay. Okay, I got you.
That was
Okay, I didn't know where that
thrown
came from.
about. And if we'd rather
Let's wait and get some better
get
numbers
some better
there.
numbers,
I think that
do
was
another
great.
meeting, and
I think that was high.
I'm fine with that as well.
And just to be clear, the alley would be the 2 gates and the guard shack, correct, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
Okay. So we'll get numbers on those projects. That brings us, Keith, to social services. And as we have talked, the transfer of that building from the county to the PBA and the potential then to rent that building as a storage facility with knowing that we need to make some improvements for that to occur. And you had some numbers that you had given us.
Yeah, a rough estimate of
785,000.
Yeah, 750, 785,000, something like that. Find it. Demolition, interior demolition at 125,000. A roof at 500,000. Fencing at 50,000. Garage doors at 5,000. Entry doors at 5,000, and access control and cameras at 50,000. And I totaled $735,000 here. The roof, I think we can get off state contract at that number. I've had others give us quotes. They've come in at higher figures, so I feel good about that. The demolition, I'm trying to work down a little bit. With what we're trying to do, we approach the $158,000 figure that would require us possibly to use an architect for this work.
an architect to destroy a building that won't be rebuilt.
I'm sure an architect could get that done successfully. Some of the other projects, I wonder, but demolition can work, you know,
Yeah.
but whether or not we can
Seems
get by without,
ludicrous. But
without an architect's stamp, I don't know, that'd be a question for legal. Perhaps they could help us there.
all right, so that number is 800,000,
Uh-huh,
and an architect's fee would be 10% on top of that.
uh-huh.
So make that number 900,000, just in case.
All right, utilizing some of those figures, the estimate of needs that we put together preliminarily for that runs us right at $100,000 a year to operate that property. That includes the overhead administrative part of what we pay. Property insurance is estimated at $25,000. Gas and electric at a bare minimum, $12,000 and $18,000 respectively. And then maintenance, exterior of the building, the grounds, at about $1,500 a month or $18,000 annually. Again, this was a rough look at what it would cost to operate that. We'll know better after doing so. The operating costs at that figure represents about $2.50 a foot for operating expenses. If you amortized the capital improvements over a 10-year period and wanted to recapture that in that length of time, that's another $2.50 a foot. That puts the rental of that at $5 a foot to break even on operating costs and to recapture your capital costs over 10 years. The going rate there is anywhere between $5 and $8 a square foot. Just is what it is. The district attorney, I know, currently they've got a sweet deal where they are at $2 a foot, but that is changing, I'm told. And so we're looking at other locations, this being one where they could store vehicles, store files, papers, those kinds of things. Whether or not they would need the entire 38,000 square feet would be up to them, but that would increase their expenditures monthly for their storage needs.
And Keith, we don't need to make a recommendation on that aspect of it today, do we?
No.
We could look at some different models to recoup the cost of investment
Yes.
in 20, 30 years.
Yes.
But the bigger issue is we need to make a recommendation regarding the amount of funding we need from the bonds.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And at the same time, though, I mean, to be fair, at the same time, the district attorney's office has immediate needs. Their current landlord is pressuring.
Right.
And this represents an alternative, a suitable alternative that I think might help everybody if the details can be worked out.
So if we can get this done, then you can begin the work and we can
Yes.
negotiate the rent.
Yes.
Okay. Falling in line with that, one of the other things we've talked about is the acquisition of some other revenue replacement properties.
Mhm.
I think at this time, because we don't know what that cost might be, I don't think I'm willing to ask the PBA to set aside any funds. What I think I would be willing to ask the PBA to do is to authorize you to begin to look for those properties and make a report back to us so that they can make an informed decision how they might wish to move forward. And you and I have talked about several different types of property, warehouse space. We've talked about trying to find some office space that already has tenants that is in it, that is available. There was a property that was mentioned in the paper recently that might be ideal, but is probably beyond our means. Do you have any thoughts on perhaps what we should pursue first, or should we only pursue one of those categories?
Well, today, I can tell you, I've had conversations with the court clerk about his record storage across from the jail down here. And the landlord there is not agreeable to do any of the things that the court clerk would like. And so I know their annual rental payment is in excess of $500,000, which is a considerable sum. You know, there are other properties available. The moving costs would be considerable, and it's a pain in the neck to do so. But long term, that's a way to pick some low hanging fruit there.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Buchanan. Do you know if your office would be amenable to looking at locations other than where you're currently at? Because I believe you are the largest entity using offsite storage.
Yeah, we have 103,000 square feet. And we're paying, I think this year is closer to 400,000. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's 30,000 and change per month on a building we don't know.
Okay.
We've been doing that 6 years with Mr. Warren, absolutely team player. And if it's the will of the commissioners and PBA, certainly.
Well, we thank you and Mr. Warren for that consideration, and I think, Keith, maybe that's the first thing we ask the PBA to consider is getting some additional warehouse space.
And just as a sidebar, to move what we have already stored over there, and it's us, DA and public defender, and maybe treasurer, I'm not real sure about that, would probably take north of $250,000 just to move it up.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rick, for that. Okay. Keith. Lastly, Stacy, I don't know. We've talked several times about the need for additional courtroom space. The judges, Judge Ogden, previous to that, Judge Andrews, have made clear that they're going to continue to ask the legislature for new judges. We had to scramble around to try to create space for the two that we had added this last session. So we've talked a lot about utilizing the fourth floor at JJC as courtroom space.
Actually using the second floor.
Yes,
Anna
second floor. Originally, it was the fourth floor, and then
Yes.
yeah.
Anna and her staff have completely
Right.
vacated that, so it's available for use. And I think we had some preliminary numbers there.
And the number, at least that we had originally talked about, was $2 million. I think that was for 4 courtrooms. What we don't need to do, in my opinion, is ask the PBA to authorize $2 million. What I'd like to do, though, is ask them to fund some amount to cover the design aspect.
Architectural fees to get it started.
To get started on this. And then there was another component I think we could probably move forward with, but want to hear from the two of you, and that was doing something to secure their parking. Do we have a number there?
There's no number there, and how to do that is yet to be determined as well.
Okay.
But on the courtrooms, you might set 300,000 aside for architectural fees.
All right. So I'm not good at math, but I have 5 million for ICB, 1.25 million for the courthouse. That's inclusive of a new roof in the 11th floor, egress, 900,000 for social services, as outlined by Keith. 1 million for the PBA garage repairs, the structural repairs and the drains. We won't address until we have better numbers. The security packages. And then architects for the second floor at JJC for courtrooms at 300,000.
8.7 million. Everybody in agreement on that?
And, okay, are you all comfortable with asking the PBA to go ahead and authorize 8.7 million?
I had it a little higher than that, but
You're including the air conditioning on the 9th floor of the courthouse, obviously.
I had not.
Okay.
no, I didn't. I don't know what extra I had, but I'm up to about 9.5.
Make it an even 9 and make that happen. No, what was your addition?
Well, I'm just doing it on my calculator.
Well, I just took the 7.5 plus 900,000 plus 300,000 got me to the 8.7.
I had 8.45.
Everybody's got a different number.
Well, we started with 7.5 and we added 900,000, right, and 300,000 for the architect. Right?
All right, let's get this right. 5 million for ICB exterior, 1.25 for the courthouse, 900,000 for social services to repurpose that for storage for the district attorney's office. 1 million for the PBA garages. That would be the structural repairs and the drains, and 300,000 for architecture fees to convert the second floor at JJC to courtroom space.
Get the stairwell on that too.
Huh?
Get the stairwell.
Yeah, the stairwell's in that one too. That's what I got.
8.45. What I had before was your alley stuff. You
Okay.
can hold off on. I still had it in there.
All right. And do you want a little bit of contingency in that, just 5%?
Let's work with what we've got and we can come back.
Okay. All right. So is there a motion to recommend to the PBA that the first series of bond projects totaling 8.45 million would be the ICB exterior, the courthouse roof, the 11th floor egress, 900,000 for social services to convert to rental space, 1 million in repairs to Metro 1 and 2 for structural repairs and drains, and $300,000 for architecture fees to convert the second floor at juvenile to courtroom space.
If we word it as not to exceed, and I'll agree that we're dropping off the security for the parking garage, I'll make that motion. That's the difference between the 8.7 and 8.45 was we didn't include that security part of the parking garage.
Right,
I'm fine with
we're
that.
gonna come back and
I'm
get
fine with
that
that.
in
Okay.
the next group.
So I would make that motion not to exceed 8.45.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Then lastly, is there a motion to request the PBA to authorize Mr. Monroe to begin to look for properties to acquire to enhance our revenue stream?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you want to give me any parameters?
I mean, I would put priority on 100,000 in warehouse space would be my priority. Yeah.
All right.
Does that sound Everybody amenable to that?
Yeah, I think we've heard the needs of the clerk. We could find something that would accommodate that close footprint. Yeah.
That's where I'll be.
Okay. All right. Citizens participation? Anyone? Board comments?
I just think we should seriously consider moving our PBA advisory to 2:30. Keith has a much greater sense of humor at 2:30 than, so, I mean, anyway,
Okay.
that would be my only comment.
So what you're saying is Keith's an afternoon guy, not a morning guy.
He is, I mean, have
Okay.
you heard him at the stand, the comedy club at 4 p.m. across the street? Anyway, that's my only comment.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
I love the architectural equipment.